The national parks of America are some of the most spectacular and strange natural reserves in the world. The vibrant terrain, biodiversity, and unique geological features of these mesmerizing reserves attracts millions of tourists every single year, and the Grand Canyon is hands down the most famous of these places. This is a map of Arizona, and in the northwest of the state, you can see the immense canyon cut out in the high plateau of the Colorado River. This steep-sided canyon is approximately 5 to 6 million years old and occupies the southwestern portion of the Colorado Plateau. Along with the astonishing flora and fauna, this ancient wonder is also a keeper of many strange geologic and historic secrets that are slowly revealing themselves. The Grand Canyon is about 446 kilometers long and around 18 kilometers wide. It attains a depth of over 1,857 meters. The canyon and its adjacent rim are contained within the Grand Canyon National Park, the Kaibab National Forest, Grand Canyon Parish National Monument, the Hualapai Indian Reservation, the Havasupai Indian Reservation, and the Navajo Nation. American President Theodore Roosevelt played a major role in ensuring the preservation of the Grand Canyon area. He visited it on several occasions to enjoy the scenery and to hunt. The Colorado River and its tributaries, cutting their channels through layer after layer of rock, have exposed around 2 billion years' worth of Earth's geological history. Some theories regarding the incision of the canyon are disputed. Many recent studies have revealed evidence in favor of the hypothesis that the Colorado River established its course through the area between 5 to 6 million years ago. And since then, the river has driven the down-cutting of tributaries and retreated the cliffs, thereby deepening and widening the canyon. The canyon forms a river valley in the Colorado Plateau that exposes uplifted Proterozoic and Paleozoic strata. It is one of these 6 distinct physiographic sections of the Colorado Plateau province. This may not be the deepest canyon in the world, but its overwhelming size and the colorful, intricate landscape has made it popular around the world. The thick sequence of exceptionally well-preserved ancient rock that is exposed on the walls of the canyon is the reason why it is considered a haven for geologists. These rock layers have recorded and preserved much of the early geologic history of the North American continent. The uplift associated with mountain formation caused their sediments to move thousands of feet upwards and create what we now call the Colorado Plateau. This high elevation is also the reason behind greater precipitation in the Colorado River drainage area. However, it's still not enough to keep the area from remaining semi-arid. Temperatures on the northern rim are lower than those on the southern rim because of the greater elevation, but heavy rains are common on both rims during the summer seasons. The first people known to live in the Grand Canyon area were the ancestral Puebloans, a Native American culture centered on the present-day Four Corners area of the USA. They're also called the Anasazi, but the Puebloan people consider the term derogatory as it's Navajo for enemy ancestors or alien ancestors. Besides the Puebloans, many other distinct cultures have also inhabited the Grand Canyon back in the day. The Kahonina, who were the ancestors of the Yuman, the Havasupai, and the Hualapai, lived to the west of the canyon between 500 and 1200 BCE. The Singwa were a cultural group that occupied the area to the southeast of the canyon between 500 and 1425 BCE. In the mythology of some Third Mesa Hopi communities, this canyon was the location where humankind arose out of the Third World from Sipapu. The canyon was made an official national monument of the USA in 1907 and a national park in 1919. And since then, it has become the world's premier natural attraction, with nearly 5 million tourists visiting every single year. But besides the tourists, archaeologists, historians, and geologists also find themselves intrigued by the strange discoveries being made in this huge canyon. One of these were strange tracks left by an ancient animal that were discovered by Alan Krill, a Norwegian geology professor. He found the imprinted tracks in 2016 while leading his students along the Angel Trail on an annual field trip to this natural reserve. He noticed these fossilized footprints in a boulder at the base of a canyon on the trail. He took photos of these prints and sent them to a fellow Norwegian geologist named Steve Rowland, who often accompanied such trips. He, along with his team, determined that the boulder bearing the track had fallen from a nearby cliff exposure of the Manacacha Formation. He explained how they were able to identify that it was from that particular rock by studying its features like color and grain size. And because they knew the origin of the rock, it allowed researchers to date these tracks. As a result, they found out that a huge creature resembling a modern-day lizard crawled up a coastal sand dune in the Grand Canyon. A little while later, a light dew wetted the tracks and cemented them in place, after which the wind-blown sand buried them, thereby preserving the clawed footprints of the animal a whopping 313 million years ago. Paleontologists who analyzed and studied the trackway have determined that these are possibly the oldest recorded vertebrate tracks in the Grand Canyon National Park. These were left by tetrapods or four-legged animals, along with another set imprinted a little later. Because the second set of footprints has been laid down after some sand had accumulated in the first set, the researchers think these prints could belong to the same species. These reptile ancestors inhabited the sand nearly 250 million years before the Tyrannosaurus rex, and experts believe they most likely would have walked using a highly elevated gait. These are considered the oldest known amniotes that lived in the sand dunes. Amniotes are animals whose eggs can survive outside water like birds and reptiles. According to Rowland, this discovery suggests that the ancestors of modern reptiles adapted to land almost as soon as they evolved. Another surprising aspect is the arrangement of these footprints. The tracks revealed a lateral sequence gait. In this type of gait, a tetrapod moves the right rear leg followed by the right front leg, and then the left rear leg followed by the left front leg. This sequence is more stable than the diagonal sequence gait, and now we know that animals use the lateral sequence of gait as far back as 313 million years ago. The size of these tracks suggests that these creatures were between 40 to 80 centimeters long, nearly the size of a modern chuckwalla. Spencer Lucas, a paleontologist at New Mexico Museum of Natural History, has applauded these footprints, saying that it documents an important discovery: the oldest record of footprints of tetrapod vertebrates in an Aeolian rock layer. This signifies that vertebrates were living in the desert millions of years earlier than were previously thought. The reptile ancestors' tracks weren't the only thing discovered in this region, though. Recently, research conducted by archaeologists has unearthed what they believe are the oldest known human footprints on the North American continent. These ancient footprints were found in White Sands National Park, and according to researchers, these tracks are between 21,000 to 23,000 years old. These were buried under layers of soil in the national park. The researchers have determined that the footprints belong to a variety of people, and most of them were children and teenagers. Previously, scientists had assumed that the earliest appearance of humans in the Americas was 11,000 to 13,000 years ago, on basis of the stone spears found across North America. These early inhabitants were associated with what we now call the Clovis culture. Tom Hyam, an archaeological scientist and radiocarbon dating expert at the University of Vienna, expressed his delight, saying that the evidence is very convincing and extremely exciting. He is convinced that these new footprints are genuinely of the estimated age. The team studying these ancient trackways excavated a total of 61 footprints, and most experts believe that the adults were performing skilled tasks at the lake edge, and the teenagers whose footprints were discovered were given the fetching and carrying tasks. It wouldn't be wrong to say that this discovery is a vital piece of evidence in the modern-day debate among scientists trying to ascertain exactly when humans first populated the Americas. It's become common knowledge now that the public lands surrounding the Grand Canyon are enriched with high concentrations of uranium ore. Mining has bored deep into the vertical rock formation called breccia pipes, allowing uranium to contaminate groundwater. This has put the biologically rich springs of the canyon at risk of radiated pollution. The naturally occurring rock with a high uranium concentration gives off a mixture of different types of radiation. It can also break down into other radioactive materials like radium. But because uranium mining isn't a consistently profitable business, the mining operations were often abandoned for decades at a time in the past without any maintenance. The large drilling sites, tailing pipes, and mines were left open to forces of nature, and eventually this led to leaks into the underground water and dispersal of airborne uranium pollution. This rendered the lands unsafe for recreational visitors. This also marred the public lands and iconic Native American sites. Many sources of drinking water remain polluted even today. A few years ago, 3 buckets filled with uranium ore were discovered at the Grand Canyon Museum. These buckets had been sitting forgotten here for years, and probably many people were exposed to the radiation over this time. The human and animal footprints found in the region might be ancient, but what the crew searching for a missing man at the Grand Canyon found isn't that old. However, it is quite unsettling. They were looking for a Hungarian national man who lived in Hong Kong. He was reported missing to Las Vegas police in July 2021. He vanished while traveling in the southwest US. The car he drove was found in a Grand Canyon parking lot in mid-August, and his body was found a few days later, nearly 131 meters below the canyon's rim at the Yavapai Point. Authorities determined that he died from a traumatic fall, but they don't know much about the events that led up to it. But it wasn't this man whose dead remains that shook the search parties. Instead, it was the remains of another person named Scott Walsh, who had vanished back in 2015. Scott was last seen getting off a shuttle bus at the park's south rim. His clothing reportedly blended in with the surroundings, and the body was positioned in a way that it was almost undetectable. Scott's body was luckily spotted during an aerial search for the Hungarian man. It was found about 182 meters below the Pipe Creek overlook, nearly 4.8 kilometers from where Walsh's day pack was found in 2015. The canyon is often referred to as a layer cake of geological history, with rocks neatly stacked upon one another exactly as they were laid down millions of years ago. But deep inside the canyon, there's a massive gap between the rock layers, representing about 1 billion years in some places. It's called the Great Unconformity. And the strange thing is that this Great Unconformity has been documented in rocks around the world. According to a doctoral geology student named Barra Peak, there are lots of unconformities that are observed locally in different places, but it's quite rare to come across one that represents the same kind of gap in time from more than 1 billion years ago. Barra and her team have found out that these rock layers were lost during a tectonic upheaval caused by the breakup of a supercontinent. However, the reason for the presence of the Great Unconformity is different in every place. The age of the Grand Canyon's Great Unconformity is known from the rock layers above and below the gap. Peak and her colleagues were more interested in the time when the rocks were supposedly cooling down. This is because deeply buried rocks are exposed to high-pressure, high-heat conditions, but cooling suggests these rocks are being exhumed or being brought closer to the surface as the rocks above them disappear because of erosion. In order to date the erosion, they studied the helium trapped within the mineral zircon in the rock. They also found that the time when the rocks were swept away varied in different parts of the area, as the western reaches of the canyon cooled around 200 million years earlier than the eastern part. The size of this Great Unconformity also varied across the canyon, with the gap being smaller in the east. At its smallest, the gap covers around 250 million years, and at its largest, 1.2 billion years of rock is unaccounted for. The overall picture indicates that the western half of the Grand Canyon rose to the surface nearly 700 million years ago, while the eastern half surfaced closer to 500 million years ago. But within this broad picture, there are differences of tens or hundreds of millions of years in spots a few dozen miles from each other. How did this come to happen, and where did the 1 billion year worth of rock history go? Do you have any theories? Tell us in the comments section below.